Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing my monthly wrap up for July. So I'm going to be telling you everything that I read in July, how I enjoyed it, how I got on with it, and whether or not I think it's something you should pick up. So let's jump straight in. We're going to start off with a few of the standalone books I read this month. First up, the first standalone I read this month was Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. You might have seen on my weekly wrap up that I do that I think I gave this 4 stars. Having sat with it a little bit longer, having reflected for a fraction longer, I think it's probably 3.5 stars for me. And that's not really because of anything this book has done. It's more that just the style of this book, the Norse mythology, it's a classic myth retellings, and it just doesn't quite hold together as a book, as a story that engages me and captivates me quite. What I will say is that for what it is, I think it's a very interesting retelling of the Norse myths. I think they're done pretty well. I think it hangs together reasonably well, and I actually really enjoy the way that Neil Gaiman has done the dialogue for some of these characters. I think just the words choices for Thor, the way he speaks, is just really interesting and really hilarious, and it's true for a lot of the characters here, Loki and others beyond. I think the voices he has given these characters really brings this mythology to life, and I think that's really good, a really interesting choice that Gaiman has made there. But yeah, for me, 3.5 stars, good read. Especially I enjoyed it because it gave me insight into some of the building blocks that fantasy series work off. There are plenty of fantasy series that work on incorporating Norse mythology and at least parts of it, and some of those series I really love, and it's been interesting to see sort of some of the skeletons of that in its original or more original form. So I really appreciate it for what it has given me there. The next standalone, and the only other standalone I read this month, was by Daphne du Maurier. This is Frenchmans Creek. I'm not going to say too much about this because I did speak about it literally the other day in my week in books video. What I will say is it's a historical adventure romance, maybe even Regency historical romance adventure. How many genre names can I say? It is good fun if that is something that appeals to you, if you like an adventure romance, especially in a historical setting. It's set on the coast in and around Cornwall, so if that again is something that appeals to you, definitely pick it up. It's not the longest book in the world, it's a pretty quick read, and it was good fun. I gave 3.5 stars to it in the end, probably more so because it's not a book that's necessarily written for me, but I do objectively see that it is well written, and I did even enjoy it, even though it's probably not targeted at me. It was still a lot of fun and I still really enjoyed it. So there we go. That's really good for that if that's something you might be interested in. Moving on to some of the series that I have been reading recently, let's jump straight into the reread series for me that I've been blasting through in July. And this has mainly been on audiobook, and this has been the Dresden Files. So I did read books 3, 4 and 5. So that is Grave Peril, Summer Night, and then Death Masks. For me, the best book of these 3 is definitely Death Masks. I think this is a sleeper pick in the Dresden fandom. I think people do not give this book enough credit, probably because of how early in the series it comes, and it's surrounded by books that are fractionally weaker. But I will say that, yeah, I really, really enjoy Death Masks. I was talking to Kate, the Almost Book Doctor. You should go check her out. We were talking about this, and the ending of Death Masks has hurt her quite a lot, I think. I understand that completely. What it does for Harry, what it does for some of our side characters, both ones we love and ones we hate, I think is very clever. And I think Butcher really does like hurting his fans. And I think we see that starting to come through here in Death Masks, and we will continue to see it throughout the rest of the series. I know I have seen it. I have been hurt by it before. Of the other 2, Summer Night for me, I know a lot of people really love. It's not quite as big a hit for me. I think mainly because I don't love the she storylines and the Fae storylines as much as other people do. I much prefer the Denarians we get in book 5, Death Masks. So yeah, that's why it's not as big a hit for me. I actually prefer Grave Peril to it even. I think Grave Peril is where the Dresden Files really gets started, really kicks off, and I think that's where we get to meet Michael and Charity, and we really get to see this continuing storyline that starts to progress through the books. start off in proper, and we move a little bit more away from that monster of the week that we get in Stormfront and Full Moon books 1 and 2. So yeah, absolutely love this series as much as I always have. I gave Grave Peril and Death Masks 5 stars, Summer Night a solid 4 stars. It's still a great book. It's still a Dresden Files book. You can't go too wrong, in my honest opinion. Then we're going to jump on to, we've got 2 more series that I've been reading this month, both of which I have finished the books that are currently out and available. First, let's just briefly mention the Takes Colandology by Arcady Martin. This is A Memory Called Empire, followed by A Desolation Called Peace. I've talked about this on my channel recently, so check out my most recent My Week in Books. Check out my Should I Read The Takes Colandology. I'm not going to say too much other than it is a sci-fi series focused on the themes of identity and memory, and it is very, very heavily political. I really enjoyed it. Both books in this series got 5 stars from me. It is my favourite sci-fi series of all time. Not that I've read that much sci-fi, so it's not as big a claim as it may sound, but I do absolutely adore this series, and I think you should check out my Should You Read video and then make your mind up as whether it's something you want to get into or not, because I absolutely adored it. I read both of those books this month, and I am so glad I did. They are just exactly what I want from my sci-fi, so there we go. And then the last 2 books I read this month were by Ni Vo. The first one is called The Empress of Salt and Fortune. The second one is called When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. Now these are novellas. They are very short novellas. They are barely 100 pages each, and they're not dense. They are very quick reads. I read each of them in a couple of hours. So yeah, a very different thing from the bulkier series I've been reading. I will say that they are very interesting in that they have a very good frame narrative. So we follow our main character as they are someone who is searching for stories to hear and record and to pass on. They are part of this order whose job it is to record stories and the history of their people. I really enjoy the main character. I think they're very interesting, and I like the frame narrative that they provide for the stories that are then told to them and sometimes by them. All in all, I think they're written just as well as each other. However, for me, the story of The Empress of Salt and Fortune was far more compelling. It definitely grabbed me a lot more. I was far more interested in that. The actual story that was being told in When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain didn't grab me in quite the same way, although I still think it was written very beautifully, and I again enjoyed the way that the frame narrative interacted with the actual story itself. I can totally see myself reading more of this author in the future. Just so you're aware, these are Eastern inspired, particularly Chinese inspired fantasy novellas. The first one's relatively light on the fantastical elements. The second one is a bit heavier on the fantastical elements, but they are such a quick read. If that at all sounds interesting, I think you should pick them up. I picked them up thanks to a recommendation video by Hilary over at Bookborn, so do go check that out. I think she speaks far more there you go, proved it. She speaks far more eloquently on these than I ever could, is what I was going to say. So yeah, go and see if they sound interesting to you. I will say that I really enjoyed them. For a couple of hours work, they really hit the spot. And for me, The Empress of Salt and Fortune was a 5-star read. Novellas do not get 5 stars from me. That is almost unheard of. So that tells you something about how I felt about that book. When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain was a 4-star read for me, just because the story, the plot didn't grab me in the same way. Unfortunately, yeah, it was still absolutely worth the read and very enjoyable. Now, for those of you who have been keeping count, which I imagine is precisely 0 of you, that's 10 books I've read this month. Now that is a good reading month for me. I normally average between maybe 6 and 8, so 10 is a big number, although it is inflated slightly by those 2 novellas I've read. So it's probably more like an 8-book month in terms of page count, but that's all well and good. As you can tell, I've had a really good reading month in terms of the ratings I've given. There's a lot of 5 stars here, a lot of 4 stars. My lowest book was a 3.5 star, and I enjoyed both of those that I gave that rating. So yeah, really good going all round. if I had to pick what I've been so glad I've read this month, it would be the text Colandology. It's already slotted into my favourite series top 10. So yeah, next year when I do that, my favourite series top 10, you can already know where this is going to be in there somewhere. Yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful, and I would definitely say, guys, think about checking it out. Hopefully you've enjoyed seeing what I've been reading this month. If you liked the video, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, and I will see you guys again soon.